Hello guys, this is Recap Snout here. Today I will explain the American monster adventure film, Love and Monsters. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In the opening scene, a man named Joel Dawson tells us the current situation of the world. We learn that his life was normal like ours until the world came to an end. All of it started when the asteroid called Agatha 616 was coming to the Earth. He says humanity joined forces and sent many rockets to get rid of the asteroid before it attacked the Earth. Though the asteroids had been taken care of, the rockets also vanished and were destroyed. The radioactive elements inside the rocket rebounded back to Earth. This caused mutation to occur in reptiles and other cold-blooded animals. As a result, many insects such as cockroaches, crocodiles and lizards, and many others can attack humans and kill them instantly. And in only about a year, 95% of the human race had become extinct. Those who survived had to hide inside bunkers, caves, or secret panic rooms. Those survivors have lived like this for a period of the previous 7 years. Joel is a survivor who lives inside a bunker along with others. We learn that everyone in the group was a couple except for Joel. Joel's daily life comprised of activities of milking the cow and cooking. A hunting party takes place every month. In this, a few members of the group have to bring some food staff according to their abilities. Joel is seen writing letters to Amy, who was his girlfriend, until he started a bunker life. One day, Joel is seen practicing how to strike down a target. Just then the lights start flickering. All of them start preparing to go out with their arms and other weapons. We learn that a mutated animal is nearby within the boundaries of the area. Joel asks others if they required his assistance. They refuse and insult Joel, labeling him as a liability. This was because Joel was not an accomplished fighter. The group then departs to fight and kill the deadly animal. Only a few people, including Joel, stayed back at the bunker. The group that stayed back observed the fighter group utilizing a machine and see that one of the fighters in the group had been killed by the monster. Joel then goes out with a crossbow to help the group. In the meantime, an animal had entered the bunker. Joel is left frozen after seeing the animal. Though he could easily kill the animal, he remains stationary. The animal is approaching him in order to attack him. At that moment, others from behind attack the animal and kill it. A flashback occurs, and we see a day from 7 years ago when the asteroid met its end. Joel is seen hanging out with his girlfriend when an alarm for an emergency is heard in the city. And the pieces of rocket fall off onto the city, and this creates a giant explosion. The pair hurry and drive towards the house. On returning, they find that everyone was packing things in order to leave for a safer place. Having been detached from each other for a long time, the two had not met to date. We learn that Amy also lived in a nearby colony. Even today, after 7 long years, Joel had the color box which Amy gave him, and he uses that for drawing the monsters in his notebook. While drawing in the notebook, Joel communicates with Amy using a radio. The pair talk about the letters that Joel wrote to her daily. However, the call is cut short midway as others were mourning the death of a group member. All of a sudden, Joel asks about Amy's colony and finds that it was only 85 miles from where they were. He also finds that it would take a week to reach there. Joel firmly determines to find Amy this time around. This surprises his team members, and they try to stop him as they knew he could not fight efficiently. But he packs his stuff and leaves the bunker for the first ever time. While traveling, he has a look at the map but cannot figure out the western side. As he was unsure of the directions, so he starts heading in a random direction. After walking for some time, he starts enjoying the journey. During the journey, he encounters a number of monster eggs, but does not panic and continues in a positive manner. He gets a frisbee in the ground and takes it along. At that moment, he heard a sound from a nearby area. His team had advised him to run and hide if he saw the danger and thus avoid a fight. Joel then takes shelter in an empty nearby house. In his curiosity, Joel opens the fridge and he instantly comes outside. He is shown stranded in front of a small pond. A tentacle emerges out of the pond and Joel freezes in fear. A giant mutated frog emerges from the pond, but Joel remains unmoved. The frog strikes him with its tongue and he falls down. A dog is also seen jumping above him. Just when he is about to run away, the frog strikes him on his leg with its tongue and takes him along, dragging him all the way. Here the dog comes in as his savior, and both of them run away to a van placed nearby. It looked as if it was the dog's house. Joel saw that Boy was written on the ceiling and assumes it to be the dog's name. Joel stays the night with Boy. The following morning, he draws Boy in his notebook and thanks him for saving his life. Then he resumes his journey. Boy is seen following Joel along with the owner's dress. Joel takes the dress and puts it inside his bag and starts walking with Boy. The two strike an unique friendship during the journey. Boy saves him from having poisonous berries and other kinds of dangers faced on the journey, and Joel tells Boy everything that he had faced in life. One day, Joel fell inside a pit full of burrows. A large and warm monster comes out and attacks Joel. Meanwhile, two of the survivors assist him with a rope and bring him to safety. While going upwards, Joel is attacked by a number of worms. The survivors are named Clyde Dutton and his companion Minnow, who was 8. Minnow kills the monsters by utilizing the explosives. As Minnow and Clyde continue the journey, they are followed by Joel and Boy. It happened so, Clyde as son and Minnow's father both were a victim of the monster who killed them, and they have been together ever since. This pair is seen going northward as the cooler climate and the height meant that it was less risky and had fewer monsters. Joel decides to accompany them until they needed to part. All of a sudden, everyone froze and became stationary as they are met with a giant snail. Clyde tells Joel to take off his shirt and gives it to the snail. The shirt had the smell of sand gobblers, which attracted other monsters. The snail would now spread the smell and mislead the monsters and save the group. After the snail leaves, Minnow tells Joel that creatures like the snail were really nice and helpful. She also informs him that one can identify a helpful creature by its eyes. Joel receives training on shooting a crossbow in the correct direction and other tricks to survive for the next 2 days. Joel draws all the creatures they meet. The parting day finally arrives and Minnow insists that Joel should accompany them to the north as well, but Joel had to find Amy, so he refuses. Clyde gives Joel a grenade as a parting gift. As Joel and Boy head westward, Boy feels something was fishy and gets into hiding. When Joel tries to rescue Boy, he is attacked by the centipede monster. It was just like the one he faced in the bunker. But this time around he points the crossbow at the monster but freezes afterward. The monster lashed at him and threw him away with only its tails and surrounded Boy. Joel lay on the ground and thought of the day he lost his parents. He gets up determinedly, shoots the monster to death. He protected Boy from the monster. They celebrate together and spent the night at a motel and meet a robot called Mavis. The robot had a battery life of 51 minutes left, so he asks her if she had any working outlets that could be used on his radio. Mavis generously offers his remaining battery life to Joel. Joel then communicates with Amy, who sounded worried for him, and informs that her colony was leaving soon for another place. We learn that they had found a new group of survivors who offered were taking them to a safer place. But the power runs out just before Amy is about to disclose her new location. Joel then brings Mavis outside and shares his feelings with her. She shows the pictures of his family utilizing its database. She then plays a song for his family when her battery drains out. The next morning, Boy and Joel continue the journey and they meet a queen sand gobbler on the way. Clyde had warned them beforehand about the queen being the deadliest sand gobbler. The queen attacks and chases them well into the woods. Joel and Boy hide by the river, but Boy gets scared and starts to bark. As a result, Boy's owner's dress falls in the river and he has to get out of hiding. The queen locates them, but before she could harm them, Joel uses the grenade and kills her by it. He falls in the water just before the explosion occurred. When he emerges from the water, he saw a number of leeches attached to his body. After this, he shouts at Boy for leaking their location previously. This saddens Boy and he runs away. Joel then starts walking alone again, but the leeches had poisoned him. As a result, he feels unwell and hallucinates and faints. In the meantime, a group of people appear before him. When he opens his eyes, he sees Amy standing in front of him. Amy is surprised to see him. After this, he again faints. When he awakes, he finds himself in a bunker and is greeted by Amy. They are seen talking when another woman calls out Amy. We learn that after her parents' death, Amy had been looking after the colony's elderly people. She is now the head of the colony because the elders depended on her. They lived on the beach. Joel goes outside to observe the scenic view. Many people are seen packing the bags and leaving the place. It was another survivor group that had approached Amy and her people in the colony. The leader of that group, Cap, promised to take them to safety. Joel meets Cap, and Cap is seen brewing his beer and preparing for the party. Later on that same day, Amy confesses that she was extremely happy to see Joel, but did not have any romantic feelings for him. She also informs him that she had transformed herself into a different person altogether and was mourning the loss of a dear one, which suggests that she was with someone else all this while, till that person died. A devastated Joel apologizes for showing up suddenly and not asking her beforehand. Amy reassures him that it was all right and invites him into her colony. But Joel communicates via radio with his colony and decides to go back. His friends are surprised to learn that he is alive. They also inform that they were planning to leave the place as the bunker was no longer safe. The phone disconnects in the middle of the conversation. Joel observes the berries placed by Cap's friend and understands that it was poisonous, and Boy had warned him about it. He then understands that Cap was planning to poison the rest of the survivors. He rushes outside to inform Amy, but she is heavily drunk and does not understand anything. Just then, someone attacks Joel on the head and he faints. The next morning, Joel wakes up and finds himself tied on the beach. He also sees that others also were in a similar condition. Cap informs that he and his men were actually pirates. They raided colonies for food and fuel. He calls a crab monster to eat up the colonists. The monster had an electric makeshift collar. They also used crabs to tow the yachts. When the crab attacks them, Amy frees herself and Joel. Amy goes to fight the crew and leaves Joel to fight with the crab monster. Amy fights with the girls of the gang, while Joel manages to push over the crab. But Cap electrocutes the crab, and it hits Joel and he becomes unconscious. The crab then walks to Joel, and Joel is seen going backward. At this moment, Boy comes to Joel's aid. As Dana aims to shoot Boy, Amy hits her and Dana shoots the crab instead of Boy. Cap's crew runs to the boat to reach the yacht. The crab is about to kill Joel when he looks into its eyes and sees that it was a friendly animal. It had gone mad because Cap had electrocuted it. Joel then shoots at the chain and electrocutes it, and it goes to Cap's yacht and kills them all. Later, that very day, Joel packs his bags to get to his colony to help them out. He gives his book of monsters to Amy and they bid each other goodbye. We see Joel survives the return journey of a week to the bunker along with Boy. He finally meets his friends once more, and they too decide to go to a secured place in the mountains. On the radio, Joel encourages other colonies to come to the surface and prove that life outside was still a reality. In the end, we see that many colonies head to the mountains for a better life. Clyde and Minnow are already present there, and Joel and Boy are also going towards the mountains, trying to survive the next journey. Thus, the movie ends. Thank you for watching.